Hey everybody, I'm Joe, otherwise known as GamerDad. We got a couple of people here with us tonight. I'll let the other guy introduce himself first.
Hey, I'm the other guy. I also smell like chopped liver. But no, I'm Neil, also known as Duff, or ImpendingDuff is my online persona? Question mark. And we're joined today by Yeji from Snickernack
Hi.
Studios, as well as Brian from MidKnight Heroes.
So
Thank you very much for joining us, both of you. How are you guys?
we're good.
I'm good.
Excellent, excellent.
So one of the things that we like to do before we get into the meat of the conversation is to get everybody a chance to get to know our guest, in this case, both of our guests. But what we're going to talk about tonight, we have both Brian and Yeji here to talk about Chibis. Chibis. I've heard everybody say it multiple ways that we're going to talk about the painting style. We're going to talk about the miniatures themselves. This guy makes them. This lady paints them. I can do that. I can see where we are. I feel like I'm in the Brady Bunch intro screen. Just I can look up and wave. I can look over here and wave. Anyway. So I'm gonna start with I'll give Yeji some questions and then I'll let Duff throw some questions at Brian. So one of the first things I like to do, and I think you and I have talked about this before in other conversations, but Yeji, if you can give everybody just a brief overview of who you are as a streamer, your channel. I know it's not just you on the channel, so tell us about you, the channel, and what got you both started on Twitch.
Yeah, so my name is Yeji, if you don't know me. I am one half of Snickernack Studios. The other half is Clint, who was napping just until a little while ago, and I haven't seen him since, so. We started painting back in 2011 or so. Had a couple of years on and off, and then last couple of years we started painting kind of more seriously, and then we kind of decided as I was moving into we were moving into commissions like part-time for a while, and every day that we were just kind of like, I really should paint, but nah, I'll just paint tomorrow. So we decided Twitch would be a really good way for us to actually have some time to sit down and actually commit ourselves to a schedule, not, so that we're accountable to other people, not just ourselves, because then, what happens with that? Procrastination, So yeah, that's kind of why we got started on Twitch, and just we were starting to watch other people to kind of get the idea of what Twitch was, because it was something that was a little bit foreign to me, and I wouldn't be doing this without Clint because he's more of the technical buff. So yeah. Our channel wise, sorry, I get.
Go ahead.
Our channel wise, we paint a lot of things that aren't Warhammer, but pretty much things that we find interesting, and things that we find pretty.
Okay. Unfortunately, I was gonna say unfortunately you stumbled upon ImpendingDuff and GamerDad channels, and now you're just stuck hanging out with us. So
yeah, pretty much. I mean.
So what is the story behind your username?
This I've been looking forward to.
Yeah, I want to know where Snickernack came from.
So yeah, it is Snickernack Studios, not Snickersnack, like a lot of people.
All right. I correct myself when I mess up. All right, I get it. Somewhere Foxy is shaking his finger at the screen, going.
Let's everybody wave their fingers at Duff. Just
I can
there it
feel
is.
the
We got
shame
him
right now.
Oh, but yeah, no Vorpal blades here. But Snickernack was I'm horrible at coming up with names. So one of our friends, I was playing Zombicide with them back when we were first starting, and he was like, I was snickering because he had just spawned a couple more zombies, and I'm going around getting all this loot and just going tee, and so he was going, don't be a snickerneck, and I'm like, what the heck is a snickerneck? And he's like, you're snickering, and I don't know, snickerneck.
I think that was the best Clint impression I've ever heard, even better than his own impression of himself.
It actually wasn't Clint. Clint wasn't actually even theirs, but yeah, he was like, don't be a snickerneck. And so I was like, that's kind of cool if it's, like snicker, because I tend to snicker quite a bit. And so I was like, snicker and having a knack for something. So that's why it became Snickernack.
I think that's probably one of the most unique names because it's literally just where things come from. And guys, one of the other things about this, well, Duff and I are both gaming dads. So for those of you watching the live podcast, we're saying goodnight to the little man, which is awesome. Yeah, getting to say goodnight to the real life behind the stream.
Sorry about that.
No,
that.
don't apologize at all.
We love seeing the home life and like yeah, it's just gets a more intimate feel.
Exactly.
I got kids, but my problem is my kids are bigger than me right now, so it's okay.
Oh well.
So it's like when you want to say goodnight, they're like, "Dad, tell me goodnight." Night.
Fist bump.
Good night, little good night. Yeah. So
so our kids live with their bio mom for most of the year, and we get them for the summer.
There you go.
And our 12-year-old, we were on the phone with him on his birthday, and his voice just went like this all of a sudden, and I'm like, "No, what happened to my baby?"
Wow.
I've been through that. I understand that.
Not looking forward to that with watching. My no, scares me.
Oh yeah.
I hope your daughter's voice doesn't drop.
Well, no, not like that.
Well,
Come on.
It's worse when you have a daughter because my daughter is now blossoming and becoming a woman, and now as a dad, I'm freaking out.
Yeah. Oh dear God.
Yeah, it was okay with my son becoming a man. I'm like, oh yeah, I got this. Cool. Now my daughter's becoming a woman. I'm like, no, I'm not cool with this. This is not no.
Mm-hmm.
See, we're more worried about our son than our daughter because our daughter has an older sister that she knows what not to do already. So we're just like, good. Like, don't follow in your sister's footsteps. Like, good.
Well, as much as I'd love to continue down this rabbit hole, and I'm sure we could fill an entire podcast talking about it, which Duff might not be a bad idea for the future.
Yeah. Parents and streaming.
Yes. The last thing I wanted to ask you about, Yeji, is what keeps you and Clint motivated on Twitch? What do you guys love about it? Because, it's not for everybody.
Yeah, I mean, my background itself is in education. Like I've been tutoring and teaching since I was in 5th grade. So it just part of that is always kind of ingrained in anything that I do miniature related wise. So me personally, I love being on Twitch and being able to interact with people and give them, tips and tricks, and just kind of helping other people improve on their craft and their painting journey. So I really do love that. Clint kind of keeps me a little bit more motivated as well, because, I'm a very competitive person. So when we do competitions and stuff, and it's more kind of like he's improving on his craft. And so I have to kind of keep up with him on that side. So just sitting down and actually dedicating some time to be on stream and be painting at the same time just gives me more time to dedicate myself to it rather than go, hey, I'm going to paint. I should paint. No, I'll paint later. I'll paint later tonight. Tonight becomes tomorrow and tomorrow becomes the next day. So I just really like the community around here too. So people have me keep coming back for some, the friendships that we make on stream. Even though we're thousands of miles away from each other, we can still talk and interact and yeah.
Yep. Well, thanks for kind of giving us the background, letting us get to know you a little bit. And I know Duff is looking forward to learning about Chibis tonight, so I'll let him start off with some of his questions.
Well, I guess we should probably touch base with Brian as well, get to know Brian a little bit. If you don't mind telling us a little bit about MidKnight Heroes, where it came from.
MidKnight. Okay, I'm Brian. Brian Saunders. I also go by Nataku, which is my tag name that I've used for YouTube for all the games and stuff that I played. MidKnight Heroes was something that spawned basically from actually my son. And because I used to be a pro painter back in the day, never was as good as Yeji. but I used to do a lot of painting for Warhammer 40K and stuff like that. I had a YouTube channel called Nataku, and it got pretty popular for a while. And I even started doing some professional painting in the early days for some soda pop miniatures. I did some videos and stuff like that. But
cool.
then I started getting some health issues with my heart. I've got a really bad heart, and in all honesty, I died. And after
Wow.
I died, and I got a second chance on life, basically. I knew I wanted to do something, but I didn't know what I wanted to do. I wanted to put my mark and make my stamp somewhere to say, hey, I did X, Y, and Z, but I didn't know what I wanted to do. And one day while I was sitting at my desk, my son, who was about 6 or 7 years old at the time, he saw what I was doing, and he's like, Dad, why don't you make your own? And I looked at him and I was like, you're right. Why don't I do that? Why don't I make my own? And so I came up with this plan to create a miniature company. And the whole thought process was to make the company. And because I know since I have a bad heart, my life has been shortened, that at some point in time when I do leave this world, I'd have something to give my kids. And I initially called it NC Miniatures for Nataku's Corner, because that was kind of my channel on YouTube. And at the time, I didn't want to do chibi miniatures. I wanted to do more sci-fi miniatures because I was still pretty heavily into 40K at the time. We're trying to get back into it. But I started painting some miniatures for Soda Pop Miniatures, and I fell in love with the whole chibi aesthetic. And that's when I switched gears and I went 100% chibi. And the actual name MidKnight Heroes actually came from my partners, because I'm one of 4 guys in the company. The other 3 guys, you don't see them. They're in the back. They don't even want you to know that they're there. But but in a nutshell,
Silent
MidKnight
investors.
Yeah, that's pretty much what they are. I'm pretty much run 99.9% of the company. They're just there whenever I need them. But we were huge video game players. We played MMOs constantly, World of Warcraft, this and that. But our favorite one that we all played together was a game called City of Heroes. We absolutely loved that game. And in that game, we had a guild, super team, whatever you want to call it. We called ourselves MidKnight Angels. So we thought, since we were all coming together to form this company, we're like, why don't we call ourselves MidKnight Angels? But it didn't click. And so we sat down and we thought about it. And we're like, well, what about MidKnight Heroes? And then that's how MidKnight Heroes came together. And after our very first initial Kickstarter that we ran, which did not do very well, and we switched to Chibi, and we've just taken off from there.
So your first Kickstarter was not Chibis?
No, sir, it was not.
Ah, okay. So I guess maybe this is more for the later segment, but I'd love to know what sparked the transition. Joe, you can interject and tell me.
No,
if
that's
okay.
fine.
Yeah, then tell us about exactly how you got into the Chibis and what made you decide to. Was it the Kickstarter's success or lack thereof you mentioned, or was it just something you found, fell in love with, and went with?
It was more something that I found and fell in love with, because I started playing Super Dungeon Explorer.
Okay.
And I really liked the concept, the aesthetic, and everything of that game. I thought it was awesome. And I like the miniatures, and I had done a couple videos on my YouTube channels of how to paint some of them, like the Ender Mage, the Druid, the Bear, and stuff like that. And when I saw my original idea wasn't, I don't know what the proper term is, people weren't buying it very well. I actually did have one chibi miniature in that Kickstarter, and it was it was a chibi miniature of one of the normal size miniatures that we were going to put out. People went crazy over it. They're like, we want that. That's the only reason we're coming to this Kickstarter is for that. And I was like, huh. And so I pondered it a little bit. I already knew that I really, really like chibi miniatures. So I was like, you know what? This one didn't work out. Let's step back. Let's reevaluate who we are and what we're going to do. And I decided we were going to take the chibi route. And once I did that, it was the best decision I think I ever made.
Yeah, I'm not a chibi person. I've never really. I don't know it's not that I don't love them or like them. It's just I'm more focused on the sci-fi thing like you used to be.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't really have my hand in any of the chibis. Like literally, I have one that I started painting a year ago. But I do watch Kickstarters, and obviously through the various groups I'm involved in, I see things like your Kickstarters and stuff, and they are insanely popular. People love them. I mean, just watching Yeji, it's insane. And then Crystal Brush having all the chibi entries, and I actually fell in love with the chibi at Crystal Brush. I don't remember Yeji. You'll probably know. I don't remember the gentleman's name, but I talked with him for a brief moment. He did Death Guard chibis. He sculpted them himself and painted them for Crystal Brush, and that was kind of the first time I was like, "Oh yeah."
Mark
I would-
Maxey.
I believe his name was Mark. That very well
Yeah.
could have been him.
Yeah, he did those.
I loved them, and I was like, "Yep, I could see myself doing those for sure." They're
Those
wild.
were, I've seen them. They're really awesome.
They were awesome. They were
Mhm.
really cool. So it's cool to hear that story, to hear how it kind of came along for you guys.
Yeah, and Chibi is, I don't know if I'm pronouncing Southern Chibi, however, and I try to pronounce it correctly, but the Southern comes out. It's it's growing,
Yes,
and
it is.
people are seeing the cuteness of them, and they're falling in love with it. And we wanted to take it a little bit differently with ours, because we wanted to keep the cuteness in there, because that's what Chibi is, but we also wanted ours to be very serious. So that's why we have the tagline, they're seriously cute but deadly.
Oh, that's great. That's awesome. So I guess the next best question would be, of course, what are your plans for the future of MidKnight Heroes?
This is gonna, I don't know how to say it, so I'm gonna say it. The plan
Give
for
us your
MidKnight Heroes.
5-year plan.
My ultimate goal for MidKnight Heroes is I want it to be one of the, if not the top chibi manufacturers at some point in time. I don't want to rush it. I don't want it to be to come really quick. I want to slowly make it happen, and I'm okay with that, because I've seen people get too big too quick that they can't handle it. So I would rather it just be nice and slow. But I want to put out as highest quality chibis that I can, and games to go with it. Oh, he's back. And put out games to go with it as well. Because right now all we do is just put out miniatures for people like Yeji and you guys to paint. But the ultimate goal is to get games to go with them.
That's what I was going to ask, because I know I've seen a few different chibi-based games at different conventions. And in fact, last night I was watching, somebody had asked me if I was going to be going to ReaperCon at all, and I watched, of all people, I Googled ReaperCon, and up came a Lynn Stahl Metalhead Minis video from last year, and she kind of focused in on a chibi game that looked like they were having a lot of fun doing like a dungeon crawler thing. So that was something I was going to ask you, because that would be something I would be wildly interested in, is some kind of fantastical dungeon crawling type of game.
We're going to take a different approach with our games. Right now, all the games that for Chibi are pretty much board games, and there's nothing wrong. There's nothing wrong with that by any means. In fact, I own them. I own Super Dungeon Explorer. I own Arcadia Quest. They're great games. But we don't want to do the same thing and just throw another board dungeon crawl out there. So what we're doing right now, we're actually developing 2 games right now. Our first one that we built, we actually demoed a couple years ago at ReaperCon, and the game is actually done, but a lot of people didn't understand the concept of it, so we kind of put it on hold.
Clint had a lot of fun demoing that.
Yeah, he did. He actually gave me a lot of feedback on it, but a lot of other people just kind of, every time they played it, they just kind of turned their head. It's not going to go away. It will come back, but it was basically a 2D fighting game on a board. It paid homage to Street Fighter, Mortal Kombat, Killer Instinct, and stuff like that. And it literally, we took the mechanics from an arcade game and we perfectly translated it to the board. But because, I guess it's because people couldn't envision their characters doing the Hadouken and all that other good stuff, they didn't fully understand it. So we're like, okay, we're going to set this one off to the side. And for our next game, it's actually 2 games in one. And instead of it being a board game, It's actually a tabletop skirmish game that has 6 characters on each side.
You got my
And
attention. Go on.
yeah, and
I
you
wasn't
can-
sure if he was going to reveal all this on the podcast tonight. I was like, oh, I really can't wait to talk about it because I heard it last night. It's exciting.
Yeah. It's a tabletop skirmish game, and it's not a huge army. It's more of a team-based skirmish game where you
Mhm.
have the games. It's put up of slots. You have 6 slots, and the characters themselves take up so many slots. So once you fill up those 6 slots, that's your team.
Mhm.
But you play on a 4x4 board, and you have the game is actually called Dual Fates because the game plays with just 2 6-sided dice. That's it. That's all you need to play the game. And in the game, we call those 2 6-sided dice your fate, because you rolling your fate that determines your fate. And so it's kind of a play on words, dual fates type of thing.
Yeah.
And the game takes 10 turns, and every round the objectives change. You have 5 objective markers on the board, which we call pillars of fate. And every round you roll your fate, and you come up with, let's say you roll a 1 and a 5. Well, for that round, your objectives are 1 and 5. You have to get to 1 and 5, and if you control them by the end of your turn, you get points for them. But during your opponent's turn, they roll their fate as well. They could get the same markers as you, or they could get completely different markers. So you have to keep them from theirs while getting to yours, and it changes every turn.
That sounds
And
really cool.
then we're also going to have other modes, like I don't know if you've ever played Monster Hunter or the new game Dauntless. It's basically a giant monster hunt. Well, one of the
Mhm.
modes that we're going to put in there is basically a Monster Hunter type thing, where you have 6 characters going to get somebody who plays a giant monster who takes up all 6 slots, and you're out to hunt him on a board,
Nice.
and you have to take him out. We're going to try to do payload missions and all sorts of stuff. Well, the second game that's coming out that ties directly into it is called Super Chibi Adventures, and it's a modified version of that game, but basically in a nutshell, it's an RPG. And the idea is when you get your character, we're still working on this. When you get your character to max level, which is 20, you can turn around and take your character from Super Chibi Adventures and throw it into Dual Fates and play it in Dual Fates.
That's great.
So you can technically play any character that you want. You can go grab any chibi from any manufacturer, play it in the RPG, build your character. It has a backstory, the whole 9 yards. By the time you get to level 20, it's now an uber nasty character in the RPG, but you can also drop it in the skirmish game and play it as well.
That's very cool. I really like games that allow you to kind of cross pollinate different miniatures, different storylines, etc. There's a skirmish game. I'm sure most of you have heard of Infinity, where you can use both of their lines of miniatures in the Infinity game. When they told me that at Adepticon, I was like, ooh, I was already interested in Infinity, but these minis are even cooler, and I'd love to use them in the game too. So I really like that. That sounds right up my alley, because I lean more towards the skirmish games now versus the big, large army games. So that sounds awesome.
We just finished our alpha testing, and we're hoping by the end of June that we can get beta testers and beta test it, so that whenever we do our Kickstarter for it, it's done. All we got to do is just print the books.
Excellent.
So before we dig deeper into MidKnight Heroes and the Chibis themselves, there's one thing that I think some people, I know people probably listening into this know this already, but there might be some others watching or listening that don't. What exactly makes something a chibi? I mean, I can describe it in my lack of understanding, like tiny body, big head, cartoonish looking thing, but what else about it makes a figure or a character or a piece of art a chibi?
You want to take that, Yeji?
Sure. Little bodies, big heads, huge eyes, usually things in anime to make everything look kind of cartoon, cute. Pretty much really cute things with big eyes and big faces. Chibi go ahead.
No, you got it.
Chibi in Japanese, it's like chisai is like tiny, and so it's kind of referring to like a tiny kid too. Some people also call chibi like super deformed, where you have to have the big head. I don't like using the word super deformed though. That's just me.
to me, I don't get all technical or anything like that. To me, chibi is just cute, and there's different types of chibi that I've seen, but to me, it's where the head is the exact same size as the body, and pretty much most of your detail and your look and feel of said character is within the character's head with their emotions, how it looks, and stuff like that. That to me is a chibi.
Yeah.
Really exaggerated kind of
Mhm.
facial
Yeah.
expressions.
I figured that's what it was, but just in case, because for those watching the video podcast, either live or on YouTube later, if you're watching that, you're in for a treat. I'm actually going to show some of the previous Kickstarter that finished and some of the upcoming Kickstarter that already closed but is going into production. I'm going to show off some of those models and let Brian and Yeji walk us through it. And then we'll put the link to the website, to the MidKnight Heroes website, of course, in the description. So for those of you listening to the recording on the audio only, you can click on the link and look through the website. I'll have Brian name the chibi as we reveal it, and then you can look at it on the products page and everything like that. Now, I guess since we're talking about anime, we're talking about cartoons, we're talking about deformed, even though we don't really want to use that classification. Yeji, I'll ask you first. Is there a different style for painting these as opposed to what someone would paint in like a fantasy model or a Warhammer model, or even repainting Gundams and stuff like that? Is it different?
I mean, it can be. It's just there are several styles that whenever I teach my chibi class, I say there are a couple of styles you can put towards painting a chibi. Usually for me personally, it's either bright, bold colors, just so things stand out on some of the features, because the clothing and stuff is so small that I like using the bright, bold colors on them. And there's a cell shaded style that you could actually use. So like when you look at anime, you have those, like really stark contrast of like, or like those dark lines to make the shadow in between the shadow and the highlight area and things like that. So cell shading can also be put to it. I've seen some amazing cell shaded Gundams. So that's a style you can put towards them. And then you can actually put in a lot of texture into chibis as well, because they have such broad like hair areas. And sometimes they're sculpted a little bit more on the smooth side. So it's very easily you can put in textures into it.
Awesome. And Brian, what about you? Anything else to add to that?
Well, I'm not as experienced in painting as Yeji is, but to me, I do find it a completely different style, because like she says, there's a lot more smooth surfaces, especially on the face, and I find that that's where the difficult part is, because everything on a chibi is centered on their face. So if you mess up that, especially with the eyes, a lot of normal 28 millimeter miniatures, you can do little dots in the eyes, and then you can do the detail in the armor, and that makes up. If you mess up a chibi's eyes, you've pretty much messed up the whole figure. And I have found the best way to do to learn how to do that, and it's different, but different teachers, is I follow tutorials for like Photoshop. I will see artists out there who have Photoshops who digitally draw chibi eyes, and I will take how they do it and just apply it to paint, and that's how I paint my eyes.
That's a great idea.
Well, we're gonna get to see how bad I did the eyes of one of your chibis, because I have the model here that Yeji and I did during a paint along a couple months ago, and so just to show people one of the styles of how it's painted and how they're made. It's not done, but we started it. So we'll show that off.
The excuses are
no excuses here. So I will have that. I'll put the link. I'll put it up on Instagram, and I'll put the link to the Instagram post as well into the audio recording. So if you're listening to this after it's been put out on iTunes, you can go to the description and see the link. But yeah, I kind of felt like the same way. The eyes, after working with Yeji on this, the eyes really capture like the essence, at least of the style that I wanted to see a chibi look like. But Brian, you did digital. I mean, you did all the digital artwork for the Kickstarter. I mean, when you're doing all that, are you thinking of a different color set as well, like a bright, vivid, I guess, anime look? Is it the same for you digitally as Yeji described painting a figure?
Color theory is one of my areas. So when I'm designing them, I usually don't have the only color that I know for sure that I want on the character is the hair color. That's usually I want this character to have blah blah blah. After that, I usually lay a color down and then I go in and change the vibrance and the hue and the shade on it until I'm like, oh, that looks kind of cool. Oh, I like that, and that's how I pick my colors for my character. It's not the most professional way to do it. That's just the way I do
I mean,
it.
they look
And
great, so keep doing what you're doing.
yeah.
So
So I gotta ask, is because obviously the emphasis is on the eyes here, right? So is it more of a freehand style? Would you say that you're leaning on the freehand style because it's literally just a smooth surface in the shape of an eye? You, I've never seen like, I don't have a ton of experience with chibis. Are there chibis that have the eye detail sculpted in and you just paint them, or is it all freehand?
There are some that are sculpted. Some miniature lines have those things sculpted in. I know Brian's busts usually have them sculpted in as well.
The first one that we did, you're right. The first one we did of MidKnight, she had part of the detail sculpted in, and we got a lot of feedback from that. People didn't like that, so we're not going to be. Yeah, she was one of them. We're not going to be doing that again. But yeah, to go back to your what you were saying, it is a lot of freehand.
Mhm.
And one of the easiest things to do on that and what I say in my classes is make sure you go and do some studies on chibi eyes. Like seriously, Google, type chibi eyes, and it'll come up with like a bunch of things that digital artists have done. 'Cause I watch anime quite a bit, so like if there's a really cool eye, I'll stop it. I'll snap a photo of the screen.
I do
Yeah,
the
there's
same
nothing
thing.
wrong with that. I do it too.
But yeah, reference material and actually practicing all the eyes and like the styles of eyes, because you can have surprised eyes, you can have angry eyes, practice them on paper, like on 2D before you put them onto the mini itself.
Yeah. So I was gonna ask you what your preference was on the eyes, but now I think I have the answer with the freehand ones. But
Well, I can't remember who it was, but a while back, I can't remember if they were going to put it on Kickstarter or if they were going to release it. Somebody was making decals for chibi eyes, water transfer decals that you could put on them.
I don't know if I go
I can't
that
remember
route.
who was doing it, but I did see it.
It'd have to be a really good slide-on transfer. I'm not a big fan of slide-on transfers. They just maybe it's just because I suck at executing them, but I've never been a big fan. I would fight tooth and nail to figure out my freehand and try and paint them on properly. Something interesting. I don't, Joe, you can remind me if this actually happened on the podcast or this was a third-hand conversation I had with someone else. But somebody had mentioned when painting chibi eyes, they also will reference drag queens because drag queens do.
I don't recall this conversation.
Then it had to have been a secondary conversation somewhere else. But
Okay.
they're like, yeah, I'll reference drag queens because they have a very good exaggeration of makeup and they really accentuate their eyes, and that's where they draw inspiration from. Because we had the conversation started by how somebody might paint, specifically how men would paint female miniatures with makeup, because I mean the vast majority of us men don't wear makeup. There are men out there that do. Nothing wrong with
I'm just trying to think of excuses when my wife sees me looking that up. Why would I be looking that up? It's really for painting the eyes on my chibis. I promise.
It had come up. I think it may even have been one of my own streams where we were just kind of discussing makeup on female miniatures, and I had made mention of YouTube tutorials for that because there are tons of makeup tutorials on YouTube, and then somebody else interjected that they use drag queen makeup tutorials for chibis, and I like kind of a light bulb went in my head. Like, yeah, that actually makes a lot of sense to me. So
I don't say that for the eyes part, but I say that for the actual, because there's so many broad surfaces on the chibi faces, right? We're locating what areas to highlight and whatnot. That's where the contouring, helps come in. So that's why I reference to drag queen tutorials. Like that's one of the things I tell everyone for not just chibi faces, but faces in general, because you know where to highlight. and
Yep.
where to put in shadow.
Exactly, because they don't have the features, so they've got to basically freehand them themselves. So it's a great way to kind of get an understanding for where everything should and shouldn't be.
So before we show off the minis and talk more in depth about some of the Kickstarters for Brian, Yeji, when you, and I know we've covered it a little bit, but when you're painting these live on stream, right, so we've talked about painting, what's different about painting them in general, but when you're painting them on stream, is there something different that you're focusing your camera on? I know you mentioned the hair, or Brian mentioned the hair, or you mentioned the eyes. Do you change your stream technique at all from minifigures like when Clint's painting his infinity models to you painting chibis? Do you do anything different, Twitch content wise?
I think I mean a little bit, because a lot of the times when I'm painting chibi on stream, I'll put the eye on 2D, like draw it on paper out
Okay.
for people, like the kind of idea of where I go for, kind of like we did on our paint along.
Yeah.
And so I'll do that. I'll also make sure that when people, or when I'm doing the eyes, because that's like, I'll base coat the face and then I'll go straight for the eyes. So that's the first thing I finish.
Sure.
Versus on sometimes other minis, I'll go finish other areas first. But because I want the eyes to really be the popping point, and I also can't stand like blank eyes, because then they start creeping me out, and I'm just like, no. And so I'll focus on making sure that the eyes stay even. And one of the things I do is I turn the mini upside down and draw the other eye in.
Okay.
So, I mean, I do that with other minis as well sometimes, but like, you can't really see that with 28 millimeters when they're like
Sure.
boogers on, on the eyes.
Well, you make a good point though. When you say that you like to demonstrate, since you're teaching when you do this, or you're explaining what you're doing to a lot of people, as I've seen you do on plenty of your streams, that piece of paper, I'm assuming, is white or an off-white. That with lighting, that if anybody watching the live cast, to your left on the image, but to her right on the camera, those metal strips are a light arc. They put off a lot of light, and you get a lot of bloom on white paper. So I would imagine that that's a little bit more challenging for you to control your lighting in a proper way, so you can show off the paper without it completely, like, I want to say, giving an aura or glowing or something like that. I've whited out a complete screen before by dropping a paper towel on my painting surface. So, do you control your lighting at all to do that? Do you?
Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. I'll look at the camera, because a lot of the times if I'm using only half of the screen, it usually doesn't blow it out too much. It's only when I like put the white piece of paper on the full screen itself is when it just kind of like blinds everybody. Gotcha. Or if I'm going to do that, then we do have a little remote control switch. So it goes down to like 25%, and I'll put it on that before doing that.
Okay. Yeah. So there you go. That's a good tip for anybody who does anything with white, is you want to have a little bit more control over your lighting. I always like to tie it in to some Twitch techniques, things you would expect a streamer to want to do differently. So Brian, since Duff is learning about the chibi world, and Yeji and I are very, very much informed as to what your previous Kickstarter was, and then the one that just closed. Why don't you give us a rundown of the previous one that you've already sent out and shipped? Let's go back to that one and kind of explain what was in that, and tell us a little bit about that Kickstarter, and then the one that you're working on now with the villains.
Okay, we do all Kickstarters in rounds. And so the previous one before this one was Super Chibi Round 4. And in that one, we had Tenego, which was our dwarf. But before I go into that, you have to understand how we do our characters. For Super Chibi, it has 4 worlds inside of it. And what we're trying to do is create a shared universe through story. But each one of those worlds, which is Super Chibi Quest, Super Chibi Clash, Super Chibi Seed, and Super Chibi Sector 7, have their own unique aesthetic and type of and look, but they're all shared together through a storyline. The Super Chibi Clash is the one that ties them all together as far as story goes. It's the main world, and then you have, and it's more of a fantasy sci-fi type world. Best way to describe it is think of like Asgard from the MCU.
Mhm.
It's very fantasy based, but there's also technology in it. Then you have Super Chibi Quest, which used to be called Super Chibi Tactics, but we wound up not really liking that name, so we renamed it to Quest, which is straight up 100% pure fantasy. And so you're going to have your dwarves, your elves, your orcs, all that type of stuff. Then you got Super Chibi Seed, which is very high sci-fi. You're going to have mechs like Gundams. We call them seeds, but they're like Gundams. You got cybernetic ninjas. I mean, just super, super. Basically, take Ghost in the Shell, Appleseed, and the Gundam, and kind of combine them all together, and that's what Super Chibi Seed is. Then you get Super Chibi Sector 7, which is a very modern type of world, but it is very influenced by K-pop and gangs and stuff. That's where you're going to get our characters like Shin and stuff like that. They have that kind of aesthetic to it.
Okay.
It's kind of cool. I can't really go for there. But so in Super Chibi Round 4, we had one of our main character for Quest was Tenego, and we try to get one character from each world in there. We had Tenego, we had Sakura, who was from Super Chibi Sector 7, and then did we have and then we had Nona, who was from Super Chibi Clash. She was our very first Kitsune. Hopefully I said that right.
So what I'm gonna do, since you're starting to name some of the characters, I'm gonna do a little fancy thing here, and for those on watching the video, you get to see. We're gonna try and transition over and get my camera running. We're gonna show these off. I really hope that this works.
I will say, rifling through the website last night, the Tenego, he was the one that caught my eye. I have a thing for fantasy dwarf characters like Gimli and.
Well, he was actually based off of one of my favorite characters that I've ever played in D&D, Tenego. And like in the character, he's a half dragon, half dwarf, who's got a really bad temper. So I had to build him as a chibi because it was my favorite character that I've ever played, and I'm writing a story for him right now too, so that people will get to see how grumpy he really is.
Yeah.
So I'm showing them off for those watching the live cast and the video cast right now. I don't have them assembled. I have all of the chibis that I've gotten out of the Kickstarter are not yet assembled. He comes in 5 pieces. So by the way, I think you just announced changing the structure of your products to list them by level. So the complexity of assembly. I think would he be a level 3?
Yeah, he's a level 3. And the way the level system works is you've got level 1s, which are basically no parts. They're single cast. However, all you got to basically do is glue them on a base, and you're done. Level 2s will have anywhere from 2 to 3 parts in them, and they're very easy to put together. And that'll be characters like Elizabeth and Sakura. You just glue that one part on, glue them on the base, and you're done. Once you get to level 3 and level 4, those are your more challenging miniatures. Tenego would be actually a level 3. He's got a lot of parts to him, but he's not very difficult to put together. You're going to get to level 4s, which is Diani, she's got like 6 or 7, 6 pieces. And she is in a very unique dynamic pose, and then she's about to cringe. Then you get the most difficult miniature we have right now of Grog. She hangs her head. Grog is a level 4, and Grog will, when you get him done, he's well worth it, but he will probably make you lose your religion. Because he's got 12 pieces.
Well, he's mounted on a big old wolf.
Yeah, he's mounted on his wolf Timber. That's his wolf.
It's gorgeous, too. I love that one, too.
And he's the first rider that we've produced. We're actually going to be making, which is a dwarven cleric who rides a ram.
Good. I love
Done.
that.
That's mine.
Tons of pieces. There's actually some gap fill work in there too. So it was a little difficult to put together.
So
yeah, Yeji numerous times told me, Brian, I'm not happy.
So one thing I'm going to show off, and this will get us into the new Kickstarter as well, right? You mentioned Sakura or Sakura. I guess it depends on your preference.
Pronounce.
Yep.
Yeah.
So here she is. Well, right. I don't have her daggers on her back. She reminds me of a cool little ninja assassin. She's like a little modern day. You got a hoodie.
Yeah.
stuff like that. So
the skull face and everything.
yeah,
or the
I love it.
face mask.
I
Here,
see a lot of people painting her that have played League of Legends. They paint her up like the KDA skin.
Yeah,
Which
the
is cool.
KDA Kali skin.
Yeah.
Is it a
Yeah.
Kali?
yeah, and then here she is on steroids. So, the most recent Kickstarter offered her as a 70mm chibi, right? It was the villains one that you just did.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. As an add-on.
Yeah.
I just recently got into the 3D printing hobby, and I actually printed that off on my Ender 3.
Right.
And Clint wanted one, Lynn wanted one, and so I was like, you know what? So I put it on the Kickstarter as an add-on if people wanted it. Pledge Manager hasn't kicked off yet, so I don't know how many people are going to want her. But she's a print-on-demand item, so whenever somebody wants her, we put her on the printer and we print her off.
This one's an interesting one because it was a single it's a level 1, so it's a single piece. Going back to your the previous Kickstarter. So this is Damien, right? Damien Kane.
Yeah, Damien Kane.
And so he's a little bit of a demon kind of guy, right? I thought immediately of and now I can't, Devil May Cry for some reason. I don't know why.
Well, in the world
is
of Super
Damien.
Chibi Quest, there's an ultimate good guy and there's an ultimate bad guy. Damien Kane is the ultimate bad guy because the way that it works is magic flows through avatars in Super Chibi Quest. He is the dark one, the avatar of the dark magic. His twin brother, Ezekiel Kane, is the life bringer, and he is the one that flows all the light magic. So think of paladins, clerics, blah, 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 blah. Well, the one straight in the middle is Tynelli Davel. He is the gray avatar, so he controls mages, druids, and stuff like that, and all their magics go through them. And the more followers they have, the more powerful the avatar actually become, and they constantly battle each other. And when an avatar dies, the magic itself picks somebody else,
Oh, wow.
and it'll turn somebody else into the avatar, and it'll just keep going.
So I'm scrolling through the site looking for these characters too. Real quick before we get into the villains, I wanted to mention this one. So this is Essa.
Yes.
I'm very excited about this one. This is one of my favorites, and she's magnificent. The reason why this one is significant was this was the first one that you guys did as a pre-release model without the support of Kickstarter. You actually did it through your product site, correct?
Correct. And she actually was received very well.
Like little witch-looking lady is what it feels like. The hat makes me think of a witch.
That's what she's supposed to be.
Okay.
Actually, the story behind Essa is she's just a sweet little girl who has a huge amount of mana that's inside of her, but she's never been formally trained as a wizard. But her grandfather, it was the greatest wizard of all, and he had this spell book. And when he passed away, he gave her the spell book, and the spell book is actually alive. But Essa doesn't actually know it yet. And these are all the stories that we're currently writing. Essa doesn't know it yet, and so she goes on her adventures doing stuff using her own abilities, and the book will turn the page and she'll go, "Oh, this looks like a cool spell," and she'll do it, but she doesn't realize that the book is actually going, "Oh crap, she needs this." Boom, and she does it. "Oh crap, she needs that," and then she does it. And she's just going around going, "Doo, doo, 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 doo. Oh, goblin, blow it up."
Makes me think of like Annie from League of Legends. Where she's just walking around a little teddy bear, but she's just a crazy killer.
Have you met my Tippers?
And real quick,
What was that?
that was the Tippers. It was an Annie impression from League of Legends.
See, I'm not a League person, so I don't know.
So
That was awesome.
Here's my failed attempt at the start of purple hair, but the eyes were really kind of the furthest along. So I just sprayed a base coat of the flesh and did the eyes, and wound up having to end stream that night, so we didn't get to finish. But this is kind of an idea of a rough start of like the anime look of the eyes. So
Honestly, I'm impressed, man.
That was a really
Yeah,
good start for your first chibi. Like really.
well, thank you.
I don't know if I could get that.
We both know you could.
That's pretty dang good, dude. I would hang your head high. That's not bad at all.
And you got it on SETI too, which she's got the most hair of all.
Yeah, yeah.
See,
Definitely.
this is where my former taxidermy comes in. I know it's weird to apply this to it, but I had a specific tool for eye canter when you're setting eyes in specifically whitetail, especially, but any mammal. Making sure that the pupils are all lined up and the right canter of the pupil, depending on if it's cervid based or whatever mammalian creature you're basically reconstructing here. So we all know, well, I guess we don't all know. Certain animals have horizontal pupils, certain animals have vertical, certain have round, etc., etc. And there's a different turn to each specific species. So I really draw towards eyes, especially in miniature painting. It drives me absolutely insane when I see a miniature where you got one eye pointing top right and one eye looking directly at you, and it's like, what is Crazy Carl doing? Why is he so upset?
Crazy Carl.
You lined those up perfectly. I think that looked great, man. And that's, in my opinion, that's probably 60-70% of the battle right there, is making sure you line those eyes up so they're convincing. I mean, that was what made or broke any mount I did in taxidermy. So I mean, if you get one Crazy Carl white-tailed deer and you send it back to Jimmy in the UP of Michigan, and he's like, "What the hell did you give me?
Right.
I did not harvest a deer with googly eyes." So,
I'm gonna go to the craft store next time I send you a care package stuff. I'm just gonna send you like one of those random googly eye.
like Evil Dead. You're gonna send
like
me
the
a
Crazy
plastic
Carl.
deer.
Yeah.
Yeah, Crazy
Plastic
Carl.
deer with Evil
To
Dead
not-
crazy eyes. Like,
To not do Crazy Carl eyes.
yeah.
One of the tricks that I employ is turning the model upside down, because your eyes are trained
Yeah,
and your
I do
brain's
that.
trained to look for faces, versus if you turn it upside down, it'll then turn back into shape, and it
Mhm.
makes it a little easier.
Especially when painting pupils, that's how I line them up. And then you also have a tendency to pull your brush stroke a little bit. So if you pull it up, it actually ends up, if you're going to do a pupil, you kind of want the pupil to rest towards the top of the brow, so it's almost like they're looking,
Right.
kind of demeaningly at you. So
Speaking of looking
I do this.
demeaningly at you, so I've got one of the villains on the screen now. This is Nagisa.
Yes, that is Nagisa.
She's becoming one of my favorites, and here's why. I loved the book. I'm not going to mention the movie, but I loved the book, Fight Club. I thought the book was much better than the movie. But if you look at her avatar, the character, and I can see Duff shaking his head. He's like, I don't know where this is going.
The book is better than the movie.
Well, the ending in the book was actually much more elaborate. This lady looks like the businesswoman after a rough day at work, strolling on out to a fight club and getting ready to kick some tail. So you can't really see it based on the unpainted sculpt, but she's got a skirt.
She's actually a vampire.
Well,
oh, cool.
even better. That's even better. But
Well, the story behind her is I partner up with a good friend of mine from Los Angeles. His name is Mark, and he owns a company called Crush Pop Productions, and he also owns a company called Monolith, who does all of our publishing. And this is actually one of his characters, and we will frequently put out some of his characters in our line. And he based all of his characters off of different people in his life, and this is one of his creation. And we brought her over into the Sector 7 to be a chibi now.
well, that is awesome. I didn't realize she was a vampire. I obviously have not read any of the character bios of each of these. But it just she looks like she's ready to bring the pain. Basically, she's got that little well, I call it her beat stick, the nightstick that she's got in her hand, or the club.
It's supposed to be a katana.
Well, it looks from this angle, it looks like a club, and if I'm looking at the character, I'm just insulting Brian left and right. Looking at
I mean, I saw Katana. I don't know what the hell.
But
you're
if you
looking
look
at.
on the Kickstarter page, with the way her jacket is covering up part of the sheath, it does look like a club. I mean, it's cool either way. Not at all.
Yeah.
Not at all trying to criticize. So what was the point of the villains Kickstarter? I brought her into the picture to kind of transition you into letting what was. You've had all these heroes for so long. Was it just to kind of bring a different flavor, or is there a story that's unfolding?
That was part of it, but to be quite honest with you, it all came about last year's ReaperCon. A lot of people were coming up to our booth because we were doing pre-orders for Super Chibi Round 4 because it hadn't come out yet, and they had saw all of our heroes, and a lot of people wanted our stuff to play RPGs with, like Savage Worlds, Pathfinder, D&D, and a lot of them were coming up saying, "Do you have any monsters? Do you have any bad guys?" Because at that time, the only bad guy we had was Grog. And they're like, "Do you have any of that stuff?" And we're like, "No, we don't." Like, "Oh man, we really wish you would have some bad guys." Well, we have a whole assortment of characters designed, but I never designed any evil people. And so after that ReaperCon last year, we sat down on the drawing board, and so I started cranking out some bad guys, and that's where I got Nagisa. I brought Nagisa over from Crush Pop. That's where I got Tynelli, and then that's where I got Liliana. And then I started, as stretch goals, I started to create some minions and some more monster classes. But as I was designing some monsters, they wound up turning up to be characters. But they were still bad guys, and so that's kind of where the villains idea came from, just to see some bad people. And when we release our game, people are gonna want to see bad guys in the game, so we need to get something.
There you go. Yeah. So I only have just the 3 core ones. So here is the unassembled Liliana, right? I think she's awesome. She comes with wings as well.
Yes, she's our succubus. She comes with wings.
Yeah. So, and I love how it fits together. And then and we also have Tynelli.
Yeah.
Right. So he's unassembled.
Yeah, he's a level 2. He just got 1 piece. All you gotta do is just put his arm.
So, and then he's just yielding a really, really awesome spear, which spear, correct? Is that what we're calling it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I wanted to do something besides a sword. We gave him a spear/staff.
Yeah.
So it's clearly a mace, Joe.
Well,
jeez, you're stacking them up tonight.
Learn your weapons, man. Come on.
Well, for those of you interested, we will also post the link to the Kickstarter out on all of the descriptions. So the pledge manager is not open. The late pledges are not open yet.
It should be up by June 15th. That's our goal, is to have it up by then.
Okay. Cool. So, and that's not much farther from this recording date. We're at the end of May, so some people will be listening to this and it'll already be open. So if you're interested, you can check out the Kickstarter to see all the additional pieces.
We're trying to get everything sculpted, because when we do a Kickstarter, usually the only ones that we have already sculpted and ready to go is the core set. All the stretch goals and stuff like that, they're not even sculpted yet, and you're actually funding them to be sculpted. Yep. And so I prefer to have them fully done so people can see what they're pledging for when we do the pledge manager. Because the people on Kickstarter, they've already given their faith in us, and they're like, "Yes, we want this." Boom. Well, when you're going to pledge manager, you'll have the ability to pick and choose what you want. So I want them to be able to see what they're getting. So I usually wait until they're all done, and then I put them on there on a pledge manager.
Awesome. Well, I'm glad I had some of these figures to show off, and I'm glad we were able to to get into it. Yeji, real quick, why don't you tell us, since we're coming to a close here, why don't you tell us what you have coming up? Do you have any, where we can find you, and plug your socials, let us know. For those of you watching the video stream and reading the description, we also have them there. But do you have anything that you at Snickernack have going on, any events coming up?
Oh yeah, we have tons of things coming up. I'll be teaching at Gen Con. Which Brian's sponsoring my Chibi classes there. I'll be teaching at ReaperCon, and I'm trying to think. and LVO next January or so are the ones that are kind of determined like in stone. There's another convention in November that we still are figuring things out, but we might be out in the St. Louis area then. So yeah, catch me over there. And if you're taking my Chibi classes at Gen Con, Brian, I'll be bringing either Essa or SETI, so you'll be having those in class. Otherwise, you can find us at Snickernack or Facebook.com/Snickernack Studios, Twitch.tv/Snickernack_studios, and Instagram at Snickernack Studios, and Twitter at SnickernackS.
There you go.
Excellent.
And Brian, what about you? Where can we find MidKnight Heroes? And what do you have going on other than your Kickstarters?
We got our con season is coming up, which is actually pretty small here locally. But our big one, we call our home con, is ReaperCon. So we're definitely going to be there. I run a Facebook group called Chibi Gamers, and we're going to be sponsoring a Chibi painting contest at ReaperCon. So, which Yeji's going to be very, I'm thankful she's going to be a judge. She's going to help me because I've never done any of that type of stuff. So I'm going to lean on her pretty heavily for that. I'm finishing up alpha testing for our game, getting that prepared, and I'm about to start pretty heavily ramping up for fulfillment for Super Chibi Villains. We gave ourselves an 8-month time frame, but I actually want to try to see if I can accomplish it and get it out sooner than that.
Nice.
Yeah. And you can find us at MidKnightHeroes.com. You can also find Instagram is MidKnight Heroes, Twitter is MidKnight Heroes, and Facebook, MidKnight Heroes.
And that's
Very
MidKnight,
consistent.
KNIGHT. So night,
Yeah.
like the royal figure, not nighttime.
Correct.
What about you, Duff? What do you got
Me?
going on?
I'm just gonna hang out in my mom's basement for now. No. My wife would kill me if I didn't come home and help out with the baby. Much like Yeji, I think my con schedule is very similar to hers. Teaching at Gen Con this year. As of last night, which Yeji, I actually need to talk to you about, potentially teaching at ReaperCon. It's kind of the wheels started turning last night. And then she had mentioned the con in St. Louis, which is actually going to be Wayfair weekend. We can plug them. Gonzo and all the More Than Dice family are very cool people. We like them, so we'll plug them. That's kind of in the works, I think, for everybody right now. They're still kind of doing the announcements for that, but I do plan on being there. I plan on being at LVO this year. So my con teaching is kind of exploding right now. Then, of course, you can find me on Twitch, ImpendingDuff on Twitch, Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Fridays now, no longer on Saturdays. So that'll be 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And then, of course, across your various social medias, Twitch, I mentioned, what are my socials anymore? Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and, of course, a Patreon as well. And then our Discord, Joe, the Paint Pit.
Mm-hmm.
We're very active in there as well.
And I think we're going to be putting a channel within the Paint Pit specifically for the podcast for viewers to come in, talk, and to provide ideas and feedback and just chit chat about the content. So you can find me on mostly on Twitch, so gamerdadnc with the underscores. I can't get rid of the underscores. Same thing on Instagram, gamer_dad_nc. So my Twitter is just gamerdadnc, all one word, and I'm on YouTube. I'll be putting some videos up on YouTube going forward to support some tutorials and everything like that. But mostly my thing right now, we're gonna have Brian coming back to my Twitch channel, not to another podcast, but to the Twitch channel to do a more extensive review and give and talk about these models in more depth. We're gonna talk about the villains. If you were watching the live video, they looked a little bit different in the actual material. They were a little bit more shiny, so we're going to talk about the difference between round 4 versus the villains Kickstarter. And so that's another big thing coming up. We're going to be I think in the next week or so, a couple of us are going to start doing some painting of another upcoming Kickstarter, which we'll get into. So check that out. Starting the weekend of the 7th of June, you'll start to see some other Kickstarter content from a different group. And yeah, so we're just kind of building up on our tutorials, showing off how to paint things, and I'm looking forward to getting some chibi stuff painted, because I've got these all over my desk now, and I'm kind of excited to mess with them.
Should do a Mentor Monday on Chibis.
No, that's Yeji.
Well,
I will bring her
have,
on with
have
me.
Yeji come in and you two do the Mentor Monday. Mentor Monday, for those of you who don't know, Mentor Monday is a segment GamerDad does on his Twitch every Monday. I'll plug you shamelessly. You can come into his channel and literally ask him any question you want. Just don't ask him what color his boxers are, because that's weird.
What is your favorite color?
Yeah. Ask away. It's blue. Spoiler alert, it's blue.
I was gonna say you might want to stop giving ideas of questions now.
And then you can
That's
also
fine.
come and enjoy my my fantastic trolling of GamerDad via text in his chat every time he's streaming.
And when you ask me troll questions on Mentor Monday, I will give you direct answers back. Like, I will completely ruin your fun, because you're gonna be like, so what's this? Blah blah blah. I'm like, well, actually, and I'll start explaining, like, dude, I was just kidding. I'm like, well, sorry, you asked the question, I'm giving you the answer. Like, that's it. It's happening.
It's a great segment, honestly, for especially for new folks who are trying to learn some newer techniques and up your game. So come check it out, hang out.
Yeah. I think that's actually going to do it for us for the podcast, guys. Thanks, Brian. Thanks, Yeji, for coming in and talking to us about this. It's always fun to see different styles of things you can find out there on Twitch and out on the web, right? So
yeah, it was a pleasure, guys.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you for having us.
Yeah, absolutely. And for those of you out there watching, if you have any interest in joining us on the podcast, or if you have any ideas for others that we can bring into the podcast, email us gamerdadnc@gmail or ImpendingDuff40k at gmail.com, or you can tag us on any of our social medias. You can catch us on the TRUgaming YouTube. They're a huge supporter of this channel, and they help us produce it and publish it every week. So we're on YouTube, obviously here on Twitch. We upload everything through Spreaker. We're on Spotify and iTunes now, guys, so go check out those playlists if you're a Spotify or a podcast kind of person for iTunes. Subscribe there, and so you can download. Yeah, check it out. Leave us a rating, leave us your comments, leave us your feedback. And on all of the social medias, please use the hashtag Twitch Creative Spotlight in all one word. We'd love to get as much as we can filtered into that hashtag. So we're still working out our guests for next week, but join us again in June for another guest or multiple guests as we dig into some more spotlights out in the Twitch creative community. So Brian, Yeji, thanks again. Duff, go shave.
Thanks, guys.
Go shave.
She's gonna listen to this and call you and give you a virtual high five, man.
Absolutely. I look forward to the text message. You can feel free to give her my number.
I will.
I'm just gonna get a random phone number that just says high five in it one day.
Yep.
So all right, guys. Look for the podcast to be published next Tuesday, and then our next live recording to come out each following Wednesday. So you guys have a great night. Appreciate it. It's been a blast.
Bye.
Bye.